Let's look now as we try to close out Jacob and deal with his meeting with his brother. We won't get into great detail there. We're in the 32nd chapter of the book of Genesis, and that 37th chapter. And by the way, I should mention that the journey of Jacob, if you will, is covered in chapter 27 through chapter 37. So that in chapter 32, the Bible there in Genesis is dealing with Jacob's preparation to meet with his brother Esau. Of course, we already dealt with and can't go over again the deception, the plot that led to Jacob, the the second born among the twins, because Esau and Jacob, the children of Rebekah and Isaac, they were born the same day. But we know that Esau was the elder brother and Jacob was the younger brother. And even as the birth was being given, the testimony of Scripture is that Jacob was trying to, as a infant, trying to supplant the position of Esau. Later in life, Esau would sell his birthright to his brother Jacob for a pot of food, showing that to Jacob, showing that Esau had the tendency to be more given to what his fleshly desires were than given to what his future and what his potential and what his spiritual blessing may have been. So when Jacob took advantage of him because he was not as interested in his spirituality and his future as he was in immediate gratification. So for a pot of food, for a bowl of food, he sold his birthright to his brother Jacob. Well, later on, we found out, of course, that there was a blessing that the father was to place upon the elder son. Isaac, because he was old when he had these kids, when it came time to bless Jacob, by that time, Isaac was quite old. He was quite old, meaning that even Jacob was of a significant age at the time, probably about 60 years old. He's of a significant age at the time that Isaac intends to give the blessing to Esau, but he, through the trickery of Jacob and Rebekah, his mother, he ends up giving the blessing to Jacob instead of giving it to Esau. And you have to go back and read about that plot, and it's because of Jacob plotting to take his brother's blessing from the father through subterfuge, through trickery, that their relationship is severed. Their relationship is of the nature where Jacob has to leave and go to Laban's house in order for him to even be able to survive, because Esau had pledged that he would kill his brother. All right. So we see the latter end of that in here in chapter 32, where Jacob is making preparation to meet with his brother after having been away for a significant period of time. And as a part of this, we see that Jacob has been released from the burden of being with his uncle Laban. We know that he went there and worked for several years. He fell in love with and saw Rachel, and had his eyes on Rachel, and he agreed to work for his uncle Laban for 7 years to receive the wife Rachel. Well, after he worked 7 years, he was deceived by Laban, and Laban gave him Leah instead of Rachel. Part of the custom was that the elder sister was to be offered up for marriage before the younger sister. Jacob did not know that cultural requirement, and as a consequence, he worked 7 years. And of course, Laban was slick anyway. He says, "Well, I can't give you the younger one until the older one has been given away." And so he receives the wife Leah, and he works 7 more years, and finally he receives Rachel. And having received Leah and Rachel, he also receives their concubines, or I should say, they receives their maids. And ultimately, the children of Israel, the 12 sons of Jacob are distributed between these four women, the two women that he's married to, which is which is, as we know, Leah and Rachel, and between their maids, Zephyr and Bella. And we know that the easy way to kind of look at this is to think about when it comes to Zephyr and Belha, those two maids, they gave birth to a total of four children. So Belha gave birth to Dan and Naphtali. Zephyr gave birth to Gad and Asher. So that we know that all of the other names that you will hear are names where the children were born by either Rachel or by Leah. And it really becomes, you know, you kind of have to look at this and kind of work through it a little bit. But the reality of it is that if you think about it this way, that Rachel gave birth to only two children, and that was Joseph and Benjamin. She gave birth to Joseph and Benjamin, and you recall that in birth to Benjamin, she died in childbearing. So Rachel is the wife that only gave him two children. That was Joseph and Benjamin. And the beautiful thing about it, though, is that Rachel produces one of the patriarchs. So Jacob is a patriarch, father of the nation, and then Joseph is a patriarch. So the patriarchs are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Those are the patriarchs. Leah has the most children by Jacob. Leah has a total of six children by Jacob. And they are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Those are the listing of the six children of Leah. So another way to look at this is that Leah has six children of the 12 tribes, and the other three wives, the two maids, and then Rachel, have six kids combined. That's two each. All right. So Zelpha has two children, Bela has two children, and Rachel has two children. Leah has six. And of course, Rachel's two children are ones that we always have to try to remember all of them, but we got to remember Rachel's children because they are ones that stand out in some significant ways, and that is Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph and Benjamin. We remember all of them as significant, but we also remember one of the key children of Leah called Judah, because many know about the tribe of Judah. We remember all of them. We remember Judah is the child of Leah. Then just picking at a little things here, Levi, which we know the Levites ultimately are the priests. They are the ones that are the priestly tribe, if you will. So they're not listed. When you talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, there's no tribe of Levite, not for real, because the Levites are the priests. And so Joseph gets a double portion because there is really no tribe of Levi, and there's no tribe of Joseph. So you have 10 tribes that are the children of Israel, because you exclude Levi and you exclude Joseph. And Joseph's children, that is the grandchildren of Jacob, receive a position as tribes. And that is Joseph's children are Ephraim and Manasseh. So the 12 tribes of Israel consist of 10 children of Jacob and 2 children that are Jacob's grandsons. 10 sons, 2 grandsons. Joseph gets a double portion. Joseph is not named as a tribe, but he gets a double portion. When you say a double portion, that is Ephraim and Manasseh become tribes in the place of Joseph. So Joseph is not named as a tribe. There's no tribe of Joseph. And there's no tribe of Levi, because the Levites are the priests. The tribes consist of all of the other named persons plus the grandchildren of Joseph. So in this 32nd chapter, we see the deliverance that we see how God positions Jacob for deliverance and begins to prepare his heart to meet with his brother. And we see that very clearly in verses number 22. It says, he arose up that night uh, and took his two wives and his two women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the fort Jokbah. Now, what we begin to understand is that the Lord had appeared to him on that night, and then when he awakens, he gets up, he rises up, and he prepares to meet with his he prepares to meet with his brother. And so that's covered in the 32nd chapter of the book of Genesis. And then in chapter 33, Jacob and Esau actually meet. And so let's just look at that just a little bit as we're just pressing our way forward. I know we covered some of this, but just going to touch it just a little bit. Here in chapter 33, it says that Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men, and he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the two handmaids, and he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. So he put he put Rachel and her children further back than he did, or I should say, Rachel and her child. He put Rachel and Joseph back away from conflict, further away from conflict than he put even his other children, which shows a bit of favoritism on his part. Rachel only has one child, and that is Joseph at this point. Later, she's going to have Benjamin, and she's going to die in the birthing process. Look at verse 3. And he passed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, who are those with thee? And he said, the children which God has graciously given thy servant. Then the handmaidens came near, and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. After came Joseph near, and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And of course, Rachel is Joseph's mother. And so this turns out to be a big family reunion where many years ago, at least 21 years ago, the last words, if you will, of Esau is, "I'm gonna kill you. I'm getting ready to kill you. You're gonna die." And this is what drives Jacob to Laban's house, where he ultimately marries Leah and then Rachel, and he takes on the maids, and all 4 of the polygamy or multiple marriages was allowed during this time. So he's married essentially to 4 women, and he has children by all 4 of them. And you can't do that now, but God blessed that situation. All of those become children that are of the tribe. Now, one might argue that out of all of these children that are born, only 4 of them come from the handmaids, but they're 4 significant persons nonetheless: Gad, Asher, Dan, and Naphtali. Those are the ones from the maids, and yet they are a part of the tribe, the tribe of Israel. All right. So God honored it, and God used that entire situation. All right. So we find out there that the brothers are reconciled, that they're able to weep together, and that there is acceptance that is taking place between them. And then when we get to chapter number 34, we see the situation that involves a very tragic thing where Dinah, the sister of Dinah, is the sole daughter that is had here, and she is the daughter of Leah. And so her brothers, if you will, Dinah's brothers are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. That is, all of these men from all of these women are her brothers, but her brothers that are between just her father and mother are the oldest one, Reuben, Simeon, and then others. And so what happens is that in this land that is called Shechem, the there is a major issue that takes place that begins to show the heart of Reuben, begins to show the 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 vitriol and the anger and the willingness to strike out and to do something very significant by way of murder and killing and so on and so forth, that even shocks the heart of Jacob. So let's just look at it real quick here in chapter 34. It says, and Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land, that is the land of Shechem. And when Shechem, the son of Homer, of Hamor, Hamor, the Habite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. That's the offense, is that this Havite living in Shechem has defiled their sister. Uh, it sounds like an assaultive situation, but it doesn't really say that. It says he took her. And but let's read further. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spake kindly unto the damsel. So you got to look at all of this and think about, there is some relationship that has been sparked between these people, but clearly part of the understanding was that there would not be relationships of this nature between the Hevites and the house of Jacob. So further here in verse 4, and Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, get me this damsel to wife. Now, it would have been a good thing if he had gone to his father before going in sexually unto Dinah, if he had gone to his father Hamor and said, well, why don't you talk with Jacob, and see if they are willing to engage in marriage between our different cultures. And if so, maybe I can have Dinah to be my wife. But now he's already had sexual relationship with her, and the brothers are offended. Look at verse 5. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter, and now his sons were with him with his cattle in the field. And Jacob held his peace until they were come. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. So they're meeting together to talk about this. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved that they were very wroth, because he had wrought folly in Israel in line with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. So they are offended. This should not have been done, and there is great offense regarding this subject. And Hamor communed with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray, give her to him to wife, and make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. In other words, let's intermarry now. Let's not have this barrier of marriage. Well, look at verse 10. And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you, and dwell and trade ye therein, and get your possessions. So the Shechemites or the Havites are saying, look, we can quash this. Let's do intermarrying. Let's find out a way that we can become closer together. Let's engage in trade and share economically, and so on and so forth. Well, that's the offer that's made, but there is a scheme to this that the sons of Jacob began to erect. And look at verse 11. And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me, I will give. So in other words, the son now is saying, look, I want to make peace with this. Can I find grace in your eyes? Ask me whatever you want. I'll give it to you. in the land of Shechem, but uh, the son's name is Shechem. So sometimes as you're reading this, you say, wait a minute, we're hearing too much Shechem. Well, the land that they're in is Shechem, but the son's name, the son of Hamor is named Shechem, and that's why you hear it here. And Shechem said to his father, uh, unto her father, he's talking to Jacob now, and unto her brethren, let me find grace in your eyes, that ye shall say unto me, whatever you say to me, I'm going to give you. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as you shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to be my wife. He said, I'll pay whatever it takes for her to be my wife. And, this is a strange thing because we're dealing with that particular society where when people had a covenant for allowing marriage in the culture, this is what would happen. A dowry would be paid to the father, to the family for the daughter. And so much of the society was patriarchal. Men were in control, and the daughter really had nothing. A woman really had nothing to say about it. They're bargaining, but the bargaining, she is not at the bargaining table. That does not make that right. That's just a reality of the society that they were dealing with. And look at verse 13. We got to get through this. It says, and the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, the father and son, deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled Dinah their sister, and they said unto them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. And so now they get very religious, and they began to relate to the Abrahamic covenant that God told Abraham to circumcise everybody at his house, all of his servants, and so on and so forth. And so these brethren, they're bitter, but now they're relying upon the issue of circumcision. But then in verse 15, here's the deception. But in this will we consent unto you, if you will be as we be, then every male of you be circumcised. And in other words, they said, now what you need to do is you go ahead and get circumcised, just like we're circumcised. And if you'll do that, then we'll allow you to marry our daughters, and we will marry your daughters. Well, the men of Shechem, they agree to do this. And when they go through this period of circumcision, then they have an incision in their flesh, and the men are weakened by virtue of this. And in their weakness, that's when the sons of Jacob take advantage of them. Look at verse 25. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, now remember these are the sons of Jacob, but they in particular their mother is Leah. These sons, Jacob and Simeon and Levi, all of those are Leah's sons, and of course Dinah is Leah's daughter. So these sons took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males, killed all the men. That's verse 25 of chapter number 34. And they slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. They just came in and just total bloodlet. Just kill all the men, kill the daddy, kill Shechem. Once they got him in a weakened position, they just took their lives. And somebody said, well, that's justified that, Shechem had relationships with their sister. Let's read on just a little bit further here as we close this out. It says, the sons of Jacob came upon them, the slain. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. Not only did they kill the men, but they took the resources of the city. They took the wealth and the resources. Look at verse 28. They took the sheep and the oxen and the asses and that which was in the city and that which was in the field. And look at verse 29. And all their wealth and all their little ones and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. Hey, it's going a little bit far. And so here's what we want to hear about this. And And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, verse number 30, you have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I will be destroyed, I and my house. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? So this is Jacob saying, boy, you guys are bloody. You caused a firestorm. And their retort is that should we allow our sister to be treated like a harlot? So this is just one of the very interesting kinds of scenarios that we see as we look at the life of Jacob unfolding and his and his offsprings and the kind of men that they are. Yes, this is a defense of their sister, but this is probably an expression of what it means to go to go too far, as horrible as it is, what it means to go too far. And so, as I mentioned to you, that the life of Jacob kind of covers through chapter 37, so that when we begin to look in chapter as we begin to look in chapter number 36. In chapter 35, we see that Jacob returns to Bethel, and that's one of the places that has to do with prayer and a part of the land that God has given to it has promised to give to Israel. But I want you to just notice one of the hard things about the return to Bethel and the circumstance there. Let's begin reading then at verse 1 in chapter 35. And God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. So God sends him, say, look, go and make an altar. And this is probably born out of the fear that the ruckus that had been caused by his sons now may cause them to become attacked by the surrounding nations, because when they hear about what has occurred, they would come against him. Look at verse 2. And Jacob said unto his household and to all that was with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. So here is a call to holiness by Jacob, that listen, we got to get ourselves together. Then he says, let us arise in verse 3 and go to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way that I went. So he said, look, it's time to get rid of strange God. It's time for us to get focused. And he says, God was with me when I was running from my brother, when I was in my distress. And now there's a sense in which Jacob is saying that, look, you have brought distress upon us, Simeon. You have brought distress upon us, Reuben, because of this dastardly deed that you've done. And now it's time to return to the Lord. And he actually gets a word from the God in verse 1 that says, God told him to rise and go to Bethel. And so look at verse 7. And there he built an altar and called it El Bethel, because there God appeared unto him when he fled from the face of his brother. Look at verse 8. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died. She was buried beneath Bethel under an oak, and the name of it was called Alo Bashu. Okay, let's read a little bit further here in chapter 35. Well, here's what I'm trying to get at. There are a number of things that can be taught here. Can't teach everything, but the Lord appeared to Jacob at this location. Look at verse 9. And God appeared unto Jacob again, and when he came out of Padan Aram, and blessed him, and God said unto him, thy name is Jacob, and thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but shall thy name be called Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. So we see God giving affirmation to We see God giving affirmation to Jacob regarding the change of his name, which has occurred earlier, but yet the Lord is speaking this and reaffirming this to Jacob. Now, just looking here for just a moment. All right, and so in this place, I want to look at verse 13. And God went up from him in the place where he with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him Bethel. In the term Bethel, the name Bethel refers to house of bread or house of prayer. All right. Now, the kind of sort of the last act. Again, we're coming near the end of the life of Jacob, but a very salient event occurs that is important in this chapter, and that's beginning at verse 16. The Bible says here that they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to Ephraim, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. So this area in chapter 35 is where we read about the birth of Benjamin, but the death of his mother. And it came to pass in verse 17, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoi, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way of Ephraim, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in the land, that Reuben went and lay with Belial, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. Now that's just like a passing statement, but now what you began to see, it came to pass when Israel dwelled in the land, that Reuben, his oldest son, laid with his stepmother, uh, his father's concubine, or one of the. Remember that there were four women that Jacob had relationships to produce the 12 children. Of course, one 13. It was actually 13 because Dinah, the female, but we're talking about the 12 sons. And so this son, one of the sons who was involved in going out and killing a whole bunch of people because his sister Dinah was assaulted. Uh, Now we see that this son goes and has relationships with his father's concubine. So here's what I'm getting at. Let's look at that again. And it came to pass, when Israel, verse 22, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Belhi, his father's concubine. So, Belhi was the mother of Dan and Naphtali. So these are his brothers. And yet he goes in and has relationships with his father's concubine. Yet Reuben was one of the key players when Shechem had relationships with his sister. He went and killed up a whole city of men regarding that. But yet he has some, if you will, sexual perversion stuff going on and at work in his life. All right, I just wanted us to see that. Look at verse 29. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. All right. And look at verse 28, which I didn't mean to miss that. And the days of Isaac were 140 and fourscore years. So he lived to be 180 years old. And as I mentioned to you, these sons, we're talking about Esau and Jacob. We're talking about we're Well, we're talking about all of these kids being born, these four wives and concubines, but it's important for us to know uh, the significance time that he lived, 180 years. So a lot of this stuff happens over a significant span of time, and of course he dies. Well, we got to certainly move on from here, and as we talk about chapter number 36, it really just is a listing of the descendants that flow from Esau, and it gives some listing of the descendants that flow from the various children of Jacob. That's one of the genealogical tables set forth in chapter number 36. And in chapter 37, we began to deal with the we began to deal with Joseph, which is the final patriarch. So chapters 37 through chapter 50 deals with the patriarch Joseph. And in dealing with the patriarch Joseph, we are introduced to Joseph by the reality that Joseph has that Joseph has dreams, and the Bible begins to talk about the various dreams that he has that become a platform for his life going forward. So let's look very quickly at chapter 37. It said, "And Jacob dwelled in the land there wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan." And it says, "These are the generations of Jacob." And as it began to talk about it, look at it, it says now, verse number 3, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age." So we see that there's something about him, and we know that he was also the son of Rachel. And so he loved him because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brother, they hated him. That's verse number 4. And could not speak peaceably unto him. And then we look at verse 5. This is stuff. So the father favors him. Joseph, Jacob, you will recall that Jacob was favored by his mother. So Jacob knows something about favoritism. And you almost think that he should have been able to remember what favoritism or the rift that it caused between him and his brother Esau. But yet he favors him, and he makes him a coat of many colors. And then look at the life of Joseph. Joseph dreams a dream, and he is told it to his brethren, and they hated him. And he said unto them, "Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheep." In other words, he said, I dreamed some symbolism that I rose up and you bowed down and you were bowing down before me. And his brothers already hate him because his father favors him. Then verse 8, "And his brethren said to them, shall thou indeed reign over us? And shall thou indeed dominate over us?" And they hated him yet the more for his dream. So we see which direction that this is going in, and chapter 37 becomes the pivotal chapter whereby these things began to take place. We know that when the father heard about these dreams, because he has another dream, look at verse 9, "And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it to his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars made obeisance unto me." They bowed down. And he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, "What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and my mother and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down themselves to thee to the earth?" And so you know that all of this, even though we read about the death of Jacob in the previous chapter, this chapter is going into the life of Joseph. So it is looking back and then looking forward. So it's looking, of course, before Jacob dies. So that the story of Jacob is chapter 27 through 37. But that in order to talk about the life of Joseph, which begins in chapter 37, you got to reflect back on the life of Jacob. So that's what's happening here, and he and so the Bible says his father rebuked him concerning the dream and said, "Well, shall me and your mother bow down to you?" And then verse 11, and his brethren envied him, but his father observed the same. His father observed the same. His father thought about it, said, I got to see something that's going on with this boy. Okay. So this chapter, while it's a significant chapter, up to verse number 36, this chapter deals with what happens to Joseph, so that we cut through some things. We begin to understand um, that Joseph is some 17 years old. That in this particular chapter, we began to see his brethren sell him into that he begins to be sold by his brother. So let's just look at that real quick, because as we're trying to get through this, chapter 12. Let's look at chapter 12. I mean, verse 12, I should say. Joseph's brothers went to shepherd and feed their father's flock near Shechem. All right. Um, let's see. Let me make sure I'm in the. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then verse 14. And he said unto him, Go, I pray thee, and see whether it be well with your brother and with the flock, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. So now the brethren or tending to their father's flock in Shechem, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, "What seekest thou?" And he said, "I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks." And the man said, "They are departed thence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan." And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. So his father sends him to check on his brothers, and he's wandering. He didn't know exactly where they are. He comes across a stranger who says, "Well, they went that way," and he goes to where they are. And look at verse 18. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said to one another, "Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, Some evil beasts have devoured him, and he shall and we shall see what shall become of his dream." So this is really dream killing. And notice in verse 21, and Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, "Let us not kill him." Because see, there was some. Now this is Reuben, that oldest son that killed a whole city of men uh, 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 at some point. But here he says, "Let's not kill him." And Reuben said unto them in verse 22, "Shed no blood, but cast him into a pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hands upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again." It's interesting that Reuben knows the impact that this would have unto to his father Jacob, and so he's standing in the way to try and prevent this from happening, but yet cooperating with getting rid of his brother. Verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto them, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came. And remember, the Ishmaelites are the offsprings of Ishmael, the son of Abraham by Hagar. And they came along, and Judah said to his brethren, "What profit is it to slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites." That's verse 27. "And let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brethren were content. So they sold him to the Ishmaelites. Look at verse 28. Then there passed by a Midianite merchantman, and they drew him. They drew and lifted him up out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. So Reuben did not see this latter part. His idea was to come back, get his brother out of the pit, and take him home. But while he was away, his other brethren gathered together and sold him to the Ishmaelites, him being fished out of the pit by the Midianites. And so, in other words, these are their uncles, the offsprings of their uncles, the Ishmaelites and the Midianites, that then take Joseph into Egypt. And thus begins the journey of Joseph going to Egypt. And ultimately, there are a number of things that are addressed through the balance of these chapters regarding Joseph's journey. We know that Joseph is brought into Potiphar's house. Potiphar is the captain of the military host in Egypt, and Joseph is put over everything in Potiphar's house. And we know that while in Potiphar's house, that Joseph gets falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and he ends up being put in prison. Now, that's covered in chapter number 39. The situation involving Potiphar, Joseph and Potiphar's wife, and that deals with Joseph being in favor with Potiphar, but then Potiphar's wife telling a lie on Joseph there, because Joseph runs out of his coat to prevent himself from being overtaken by the lust that is on the life of Potiphar's wife, and then she uses his coat as evidence to accuse him of sexually assaulting her, and thus he is put in prison for a false claim of sexual assault. All right, now that's chapter number 39. I skipped chapter 38 just because chapter number 38 deals with a very difficult situation involving Judah and Tamar, and it's worth taking some time to read it in your own time. But let's just take a very quick look at it. It said, "It came to pass at the time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hara. And Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her. And he conceived and bare a son and called him And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called him Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son and called him Shelah, and he was a Shezab, which she bare." And now this is where I want to get into. And Judah took a wife of Let's move on a little further. Verse 8. Let's see. All right. And so in verse number 8, I won't read it for obvious reasons. You take some time to read it. This is a situation regarding something occurring where there is a spilling on the ground. And somehow in this verse 10, it says, "The thing displeased the Lord, therefore he slew him also." And then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah thy son be grown," where he says, "Lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did." And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So I wanted to point this out for those of you that want to go back and kind of study that a little bit. It's a little bit touchy to deal with it in like this public setting across the public ways, but I just wanted to point that area of scripture out to be it would take some time to really get into some of the concepts that are involved there, so I just leave that where it is. All right. So chapter 40 deals with Joseph while he's in the prison, and it deals with the interpretation of dreams while he's in prison. I mean, this is the thing that some would argue has already gotten him into prison, and now he is in prison interpreting dreams, and that begins at chapter number 40. And so, while in prison, Joseph interprets dreams, and there are two dreams that Joseph interprets, and that is the dream of Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker. What had occurred is that Joseph, the cupbearer to the king of Egypt, to the Pharaoh, the cupbearer to the Pharaoh had been put in prison, and the baker had been put in prison. And Joseph interprets the dreams that the various ones have, and his interpretations are spot on. So when you look at this chapter number 40, you'll see that it says, "And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended the Lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers." And it goes on to tell us, "And he put them in ward in the house of their captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in war." They were in prison, and Joseph was charged to serve them. "And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker and the king of the king of Egypt, which were bound in prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, Wherefore look you so sad? Why are you sad? And they said, We have dreamed the dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me then, I pray you. So Joseph says, I'm not going to be some soothsayer or somebody trying to be a seer without the help of God. He said interpretations belong to God. This was something that is a very important part of Joseph's life. He said the interpretation belong to God. So God can give the interpretation. He can show us what he wants to show us. And look at verse 9. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine there were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. This is the dream of the butler, right? And Pharaoh's cupbearer was in my and Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave of the cup to Pharaoh's hand. All right. So let's look at verse 9 again. It says, And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said unto him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, etc., etc. And in verse number 12, and Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee into thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. So you're going to be restored. That's his interpretation of the dream. Verse 14, but think on me when shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh. So he puts in a word. He says, listen, that's the interpretation. You're going back. Don't forget me when you're there, and mention me to the king. Verse 15, for indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that I should be in this dungeon. Now look at verse 16. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I was also in my dream, and behold, I had three white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was an all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The three baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee in a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh off of thee. And it came to pass in the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all the servants, and lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership, and he gave the chief into Pharaoh's hands, and he hanged the baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So that this is Joseph in prison. These are the dreams that he's dealing with. He interprets the dreams. He tells the butler to remember him because he's being restored, and the butler is restored, but he forgets him. He doesn't look out for a brother, so to speak. And then in chapter 41, as we move along here, in chapter 41 is where there is a dream that is interpreted by there's a dream that Pharaoh has, and Pharaoh needs the interpretation of the dream. It is only then that there is a reflection by the butler that there is a person in prison that is able to interpret dreams. And the king dreams of he dreams of a time where there is significance in the land, and a time where there is famine in the land, but he doesn't understand the interpretation of it. And Joseph is brought up to interpret the dream, and he interprets that there are going to be 7 years of prosperity and 7 years of great famine thereafter. And so he begins to give prophetic interpretation, and he begins to give prophetic directions that in the 7 years of prosperity, you must prepare for the 7 years of famine. A lot of times what we want to do is we want to pray away the coming of famine or the coming of difficulty, when the notification of the coming of difficulty is typically in the season of preparation. And so when he gives them word of the importance to prepare in the season of preparation. Well, this interpretation brings Joseph out of the prison, and he's exalted to a place of rulership. Look at verse number 37 in chapter 41. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, in the eyes of his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this man, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? This is Pharaoh talking. Verse 39, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath shown thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. And thou shalt be over my house, and according unto the word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. So in other words, he said, I'm still the king, but you're going to run everything. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. You're going to run everything here. He goes from the prison to the palace, but he goes not just for a sit down. He goes there to run things. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain upon his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried unto him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And so this is the setting in which we find Joseph now, that the Lord has raised him up, and the Lord has brought him out of the prison. He's even given a wife. Verse 45, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephah Paneah, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, and the daughter of Potiphar, priest of Onan. And Joseph went out all over the land of Egypt. And listen to this in verse 46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he took when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt, 30 years old. So if he's 17 when he is, or when his brethren put him in the pit, uh, all of this is going from chapter to chapter. But now you see that you got 12 or 13 years of his journey before he comes to the place of rulership. He's a ruler at the age of 30. Jesus begins his earthly ministry at the age of 30. There's something significant about that age of 30. So the age of 30, he becomes a ruler in the land, and he begins to show Egypt how to prepare for the upcoming famine. And chapter 42 talks about Joseph visiting all over Egypt uh, and in dealing with the various issues that are in Egypt. And then it talks about that, and then we get into the reality that the family of Joseph begins to come to Egypt because of the famine that is affecting areas outside of Egypt. Egypt is the place where you can get bread because everywhere else is not prepared for the famine that comes. But because of Joseph, there is preparation in Egypt. And so people come to Egypt to buy bread. And we're going to see as we close now on next week, the family of Joseph, Jacob's sons, coming to purchase bread and not even noticing that their brother is the person that's in charge. And ultimately, his father is going to be brought. And Joseph continues to disguise himself until he cannot take it any longer. And he discloses to his brethren that he is their brother and that what they meant for his harm, God has turned it to his good. And Joseph becomes and remains a ruler in Egypt. And that's how the book of Genesis is going to end up. It's going to end up with the family of Abraham, some 70 of them being in Egypt. And that is a fulfillment of the promise that God began to give to Abraham, where he says, there's going to come a time that my family, you're going to be in Egypt for a period of time. And it's ultimately going to result in bondage and slavery. But then I'm going to bring you out with a high hand. And the beginning of this centers around Joseph's journey into Egypt.